Yeah. All right, I believe we can start.
Yes.
So good afternoon, everybody. Apologies, first of all, for the late start, but we were having some technical difficulties. Welcome to a presentation today that's jointly organized by the Department of Educational Studies and the Center for Cultural Identity and Education. This is the visiting scholar presentation for somebody who's a visiting scholar in the Center for Cultural Identity and Education and in the Department of Educational Studies. That is Dr. Diana Mendes Machado da Silva. She is a visiting scholar jointly at the CCIE and the Department of Educational Studies at UBC. And UBC, of course, is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Musqueam. Dr. Da Silva has been with us since January, and her stint as visiting scholar ends in July. And before I say more about her, I'd like to thank various people who have been involved in organizing her presentation. I'm very grateful to Holly Kate, who is the manager of the Department of Educational Studies. That's Holly Kate Collinson Shield. Jennifer D'Souza, who's been helping with sorting out some of the technical difficulties, who's assistant to the head of department. Carl Luke, who's a very able IT coordinator. And of course, Professor Andre Mazawi, who is head of the Department of Educational Studies. My name is Handel Wright. I'm a professor in educational studies. I'm also the director of the Center for Cultural Identity and Education. So now more about our visiting scholar. Dr. Da Silva is a Brazilian historian and researcher who's affiliated with the Human Rights, Democracy, and Memory Group at the Institute of Advanced Studies, University of Sao Paulo, and with the Afro-Brazilian Studies Center at the Federal University of Sao Paulo. Previously, she worked as an assistant professor at the University of Sao Paulo, and during her tenure, she was the coordinator of the Racial Violence Observatory, where she led research on the public perception of racial violence in Brazil based on newspaper articles. She also conducted research on Black women's health, which focused on the relationship between public systems and local traditional and popular knowledge in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro and Salvador. Additionally, she coordinated an extension project devoted to producing content to help implement the Brazilian law that requires teaching African and Afro-Brazilian history and culture in elementary and secondary schools. And she has interesting stories to tell about how well or not so well that is going. Diana's master's and PhD research, which is situated within cultural studies and popular culture studies, focused on the popular immigrant and Black fandom and consumption of soccer and its impact on the construction of Brazilian modernity and national identity. She has published 2 books on this subject and is currently preparing her 3rd book, which examines the construction of Black soccer celebrities in Brazil. And you might hear a little bit about that today. During her stint at UBC, she has been having interactions with colleagues at the Center for Cultural Identity and Education, the Department of Educational Studies, and the Institute for Gender, Race, Sexuality, and Social Justice, including discussions and possible collaboration on the social-cultural aspects of the African diaspora in the Americas, the development of anti-racist policies, and addressing anti-Black racism and other forms of discrimination in and through education. Dr. Da Silva has been an active part of UBC since her arrival. She has attended EDST departmental meetings and she's presented on at least two classes that I know of this summer. One at the GRSJ, and also in my own graduate course on research methodology in education. So without too much more ado, please join me in welcome Dr. Diana Mendez Machado da Silva.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I would like to tell you I'm delighted to be here this afternoon, and I also like to thank Professor Handel Wright, Professor André Mazawi, for inviting me to this academic period here at EDST and CCIE, and also Professor Eleonora Angels, Professor Isabel Machado, and Sandra Bonfim, for connecting me to the Institute of Gender, Race, Sexuality, and Social Justice, and my friends and family for being here. In this talk, Black Visual Representation as Sports Celebrities in Brazil, I will highlight some aspects of my PhD research, which I defended shortly before the pandemic at 2019. It was substantially expanded after my work as a coordinator of the Center of Reference at Brazilian Football Museum and coordinating the Racial Violence Observatory at the Federal University of São Paulo. These functions demanded new approaches on Black studies and Black visual culture. And my presentation today considers all these new contributions. And since we are in the Faculty of Education, it is interesting to mention that Black soccer players and their images are quite meaningful to Brazilian education because it is a substantial part of our national identity. This is our agenda, little summary of my PhD, some stories about Leonidas' photographs, and some ideas as a conclusion. Okay, here are some of our cracks, our characters. First, Leonidas da Silva, Pelé, Marta, Vini Jr., and Formiga. Leonidas is our case today. All of them Black soccer players from Brazil. And in a cut version, a celebrity is precisely this, someone you recognize easily by a photograph. This recognition is a sign of their public importance. That's why this research was based not on Leonidas' biography or professional and sportive career, but on the trajectory of his images, especially those produced by the press. Let me start with a few comments about some theoretical and methodological approaches that guided me. This research placed the subject of the production of Black soccer celebrities in a broader context of post-abolition in Brazil and Americas, where the photographs played a fundamental role in the configuration of a sports and entertainment labor market. Just one note, important note. In Brazil, slavery was abolished at the end of the 19th century, at the same moment that photographs arrived. That's why we have a lot of images of slavery and enslaved people in Brazil. And this coincidence produced a lot of consequences. Please, it's important to say that half of the Brazilian population was and is Black people in Brazil. Half a population, 200,000 million of people. We have the half of Black people. For me, this unusual relationship between Blackness, slavery, and photograph can be better understood through an important work by Stuart Hall of Black Studies and Social Studies. In his essay, What is this Black in Black Popular Culture? Stuart Hall claims that American mainstream popular culture has always involved certain traditions that can only be traced to vernacular Black popular culture traditions. And I will try to demonstrate some connections between this idea and my work, some connections, okay? In my PhD research on soccer and visual culture, I studied the press photograph production at the beginning of the 20th century to understand the emergence of an urban and sporting visual culture that was central to creating sports celebrities. The first of these celebrities was Leônidas da Silva, a Black soccer player from the lower class who played between 1930 and 1950. He was considered the fourth star of this sport, not only for his performance in soccer clubs and the Brazilian national team, but also because he was photographed as such. During years, hundreds of photographs of Leônidas circulated in sports and periodical newspapers and magazines in Brazil and abroad. Analyzing this collection of photographs helped me understand how he was visually represented and how prominent he was in the sports world. Leônidas da Silva was regarded as a star during the emergence of the entertainment market and media culture in Brazil, when the country was striving to move beyond the image of slavery to embrace modernity. These photographs confirmed his excellence as a player and showed how he, public opinion, Brazilian state, and the press invested in shaping his public image. They also provided an opportunity to negotiate the visibility and visual representation of Black masculinity on new grounds. Because before, photographs about Black people were taken through the white gaze, and this gaze produced and reproduced a lot of stereotypes. With new models, for example, from soccer or artistic fields, it initiated the circulation of portraits of Black individuals. And as you know, portraits show the singularity of each person, of each one. This kind of thing nowadays is a little bit different, but in that time, it's to show the singularity of each one. These kinds of images, types, and stereotypes in one side, portraits and subjectivities, the other side, are just 40 years apart. Just one generation, it's a short time. For these reasons, my research resorted to qualitative and quantitative analysis to study press photographs in the context of culture and visual history. It focused on the relationships between the project of new city of Rio de Janeiro, previous capital of Brazil, soccer, media culture, and the production of Black celebrities. All these elements and their relationships depended on images. To accomplish this, I established a dialogue with the works of W.J.T. Mitchell, Jonathan Crary, André Gunther, among others, to highlight the significance of visual images of the Black population in shaping national culture and identity. The research also shed light on some aspects of the Afro-Brazilian culture and history after the abolition of slavery, emphasize the agency of the Black people and the importance of their photographs in this context. Okay, this is a summary of the research, and I have another kind of summary. It's a mini documentary, a mini documentary produced by a filmmaker for an online magazine, and we will watch it because it shows us another layer of meaning of these images that I studied, because I studied photographs that were taken 100 years ago, and throughout this period, these images have received a lot of layers of meaning in different contexts. And it is also interesting because it's a creative way to share historical content, okay? The subtitles were generated by YouTube, okay? That's maybe some problems, but the general idea is to show us the appropriation of images, okay?
Material tratada como forma de representar pessoas e modos de vida deles. Se no início era estática e valorizava pessoas em retratos que remetiam ao universo privado, no início do século XX a fotografia passou a ocupar as frentes de futebol, onde continuaria representando a elite agrária. Retratos de jogadores e de times foram tão valorizados que logo começaram a circular em jornais e revistas da capital do Brasil. Marcos Carneiro de Mendonça, goleiro do Fluminense e primeiro selecionado brasileiro, foi um ícone desse tempo, reunindo talento para o jogo e para as poses fotográficas.
Resolveram fazer o seu primeiro campeonato, vencido pelo Fluminense em 1906.
Mas o campo de futebol podia mais. Novos jogadores foram sendo incorporados às imagens do esporte. Sinal de que o futebol se transformava dentro e fora dos campos. O principal signo dessa mudança foi a cor da pele desses novos integrantes. Negros, oriundos dos bairros suburbanos e pobres em sua maioria, os novos jogadores substituíam os representantes do futebol amador naquelas mesmas páginas de jornais e de revistas criadoras de imagens sociais. Foi nesse contexto que surgiu Leônidas da Silva. Sua excepcionalidade em atuações no Flamengo, no São Paulo, principalmente na seleção brasileira de 1938, foi registrado em centenas de fotografias. Leônidas sabia se deixar retratar. E a bicicleta, uma das principais jogadas de Leônidas, que nos dá a dimensão da importância da fotografia em sua trajetória.
Se usava, dizia que era meu fora, o outro era fugido, mas não tem a habilidade de ser o criador, o autor do lance de bicicleta.
Foram quase 20 anos até Alberto Fatini conseguir captar com perfeição a mais famosa marca do jogador. As imagens de Leônidas foram centrais para a construção do universo visual do esporte. E não por coincidência, produziram também o primeiro craque da história do futebol no Brasil.
This video shows photography's role in transitioning from an old social order to promise of a new, modern, bourgeois one. It's interesting because in Brazil, this process of modernization would mean, at least in theory, finally including the biggest part of the population in the Republican regime and in the labor markets, offering them citizenship and conditions to work and even compete with other works. But we know what really happened. Okay, anyway, this is just an overview of the general context of this research, which includes the contrast between Black and white people in sports, the influence of the old aristocratic photographic models in representing players at the beginning of the 20th century, and the change with new characters and spectatorship. Now, let's move to how Black people have embraced photographic culture from one case, my study case, Leonidas photographs. I call this telling stories with and through Leonidas photos. My approach to telling stories with and through photographs are based on those of the historians Saidiya Hartman and Carlo Ginzburg, who taught us to start from tiny clues, traces, and fragments to shed light on the broader context to which they belong. For both, this is the only way to reveal stories not foreseen by official and controlled documents and archives, which prefigure, and shape ideas and narratives. Now we can start. This is a kind of album of Leonidas. Each photograph tells us a little story. I will tell you 2 or 3 stories. And as I said before, I will share some stories that are not necessarily facts about Leonidas da Silva's life, but rather a photographic biography. I will focus on images, considering their temporality, archives, use, and associated meanings. The first story I called Leonidas suit. And I want to start with this image, one from Leonidas' extensive collection of photographs, because it's unique. During his lifetime, Leonidas collected a lot of photos of himself. Most of these images were newspaper and magazine clippings. Actually, he created an archive tracing his media trajectory, and he started to donate some of them at the end of his career and end of his life to institutions like São Paulo Futebol Clube, where he played. After his passing in 2004, his widow, Mrs. Albertina dos Santos, inherited the archive and donated some of these images to, for example, to the FIFA's museum in Switzerland. However, this particular photograph was preserved by both Leonidas da Silva and Mrs. Albertina and kept in their collection. Why did it escape the donation to the museums and memories institutions that clearly searched for Leonidas and Mrs. Albertina for that purpose? Let us consider this document more closely. The image shows Leonidas posing for the photograph, wearing a well-tailored suit and a fancy hat. The picture captures a young Leônidas da Silva who probably had departed from the suburban neighborhood of São Cristóvão, where he used to live, to begin his life as a player in Bom Sucesso Soccer Club, located in the city, in the center of the city of Rio de Janeiro. The center of the city of Rio de Janeiro had recently undergone a renewal, trying to leave the marks of slavery behind in urbanist words. And that meant expelling poor and Black people from the city center to the top of the hills where they built the favelas. But again, why did this image remain in Leônidas' archive? Why didn't he choose to keep a sports image? Maybe a picture selected among the photographers captured on the field to sell to the newspapers and the players themselves, which was very, very common at that moment. It is important to remark that Leônidas always preferred the photos published in magazines and newspapers, probably to prove the importance of his public image. For Mrs. Albertina, his widow, Leônidas loved this image because he looked very handsome and elegant. And as she agreed with him, she probably decided to keep preserved this photograph. But perhaps this other photograph, also kept in his personal archive, can give us another clue. This photograph. We can see some difference between them. For example, the cut of the suit. Look. This one looks bigger for him. No? We can see the chosen photographic pose and the background of each photograph. Which one is more controlled? This one or this one? Which one looks more spontaneous? And which one shows more confidence and attitude? To contextualize this image, we can also compare it with another one produced 40 or 50 years before. Okay? This one. This image circulated on visiting cards in Brazil and around the world in the 19th century. Colored types in this small size for people put in the wallet. Colored types, these photographs were produced in a late circuit of slavery images, showing different types of works or ethnic groups. This is just one example of black skin and white masks, or in other words, black faces and bodies and white perspectives. At that time, it was also possible to see wanted composite sketches in newspapers, like this one. It's a kind of announcement that was used to hunt and recover enslaved people in the 19th century. In this case, they were looking for Fortunato. You can see? looking for Fortunato, who was 20 years old. But this drawing, this sketch, was used a lot of time, the same sketch was used a lot of time to recover many other people. Thus, any black boy or any black man could be a fugitive slave, because it's not a personal image, it's a sketch. Hopefully, this kind of announcement, it's a past thing. True? We don't have it anymore, right? Okay, but both these examples, after seeing these two images, we have an important issue here. This kind of photograph contrasts a lot with these kinds of stereotypes produced 40 years before to show not a person in his singularity, but an image of control to maintain people under control. Only 40 years after the formal ending of slavery, Leonidas assumed his place in the city center, not under an image of control, but as someone who chose his image with a good suit, in a correct bourgeois pose, probably seeing a rowing competition at the sea, in sea. Watching rowing competitions was part of the urban entertainment and modern behavior. In an important and deep sense, he affirms his right to be downtown. And this kind of photograph helped him with this task. These are just some details that show us how a new social position identity was assumed via photograph. After having built the aristocracy image, photographs played an important role in building up a new identity for Black and poor people in a city that denied them. This is the first story. The second one is Leonidas as an icon of miscegenation. The second image I would like to analyze is this one, whose rights are held by Getty Images, a company based in the United States. This image has circulated worldwide and is now owned by an American company. It's very interesting. This photo is among the most impressive ones. It was taken during the 1938 World Cup. Although the exact game cannot be identified, it is noticeable that at the moment of the photograph, Leonidas was already highly admired. At the moment of the World Cup, Leonidas was the most important star. Many questions mobilize me around this photo. For example, why did this image end up with Getty Images and not with FIFA's museum, for example? Because I found this image in FIFA's archive, and then I discovered that it belongs to Getty Images. And we may not know exactly what happened until to visit the company's headquarters in Seattle, which I intend to do soon. But for now, we can focus on the composition of the photograph. Another important question about the image is, this photograph, is it a flash, a snapshot, or a pose? I have many doubts. However, we can see that Leonidas occupies almost half of the space of an image. Can you see? Almost half. And it has an individual in the spotlight. In contrast, the other half is occupied by a crowd of people squeezed up to observe him closely. The gaze, very well captured by the photographer, metaphorize the process I'm discussing here. This gaze builds celebrity. And a celebrity, Leonidas, in turn, should reflect the gazes, desires, and projections of those who made him a celebrity. We must not overlook another detail. Some people look directly at the camera, completing the game of projections by seeking the lens. These people reveal their desire to be captured by the camera to gain social recognition. The image offers us another layer of meaning. It was produced in France during the 1938 World Cup, after 2 years after the Olympic Games, with Hitler, Jesse Owens, etc. At the same time, crowds were already aligned themselves with Hitler and Mussolini in large stadiums, producing, as Leni Riefenstahl did, many images about homogeneity, obedience, and control. These images prefigured World War II. This kind of images. Rome, 36, and Berlin, 1936 too. In these images, we can see repetition, uniformity of movements in heads, arms, and hands, and this kind of movements perfectly matching that modernist kind of stadium architecture. On the contrary, the image of Leonidas carried an image of Brazil still today sold worldwide: miscegenation, heterogeneity, and racial democracy. Please pay attention. We are talking about images. And this image was constructed with the help of an artists and photographers in Brazil and France in an intense circuit that lasted for decades. I have some examples of artists' production at this time in Brazil. This is by Cândido Portinari. Portinari was one of the most important modernist artists in Brazil. These pictures were produced in 1934, and we can see their general idea of these pictures. We have a type or a stereotype, a black man, a black and strong man, highlighted in front, and the long land, a farm behind him in the background, producing the background. The question is, which context is the artist referring to? These images developed an important role in terms of international diplomacy and international public opinion, while simultaneously hiding the racial inequality in Brazil and the violence against Black people and Black culture. This is the second story. The third story is Leonidas has has an author of a soccer move. The last photograph that I will analyze inaugurates the memorable images of soccer, moments that had to wait until the 40s in Brazil to reach their potential. Two things respond to that: technological developments and photographers' abilities. This photograph, for example, was taken in 1948, but the story of this photograph, of this image, had already been going on for more than 20 years. Many photographers before Antonio Sartini tried to take this photograph, highlighting the moment when Leônidas da Silva executed the bicycle move. And the bicycle move, it consists of staying parallel to the floor, moving his legs in the air to kick the ball, like that, and to kick the ball. This photograph, for example, was taken, capturing a moment like that is much easier today. But could you imagine doing this in the 30s, when everybody was still trying to understand the game and photographers were still learning to master where to place themselves, studying this distance and perspectives to take better photographs? At the same time, the cameras had just started to offer the possibility of instantaneous capture to make snapshots. Furthermore, in this specific case, the photographer had to predict Leônidas' movement because the shot should be made milliseconds before the movement itself takes place. We can see here, to execute the completed bicycle, it's necessary to make 5 little movements. The momentum to jump, jumping, switching legs in the air, and kicking the ball. In short, beyond his aesthetic beauty, Sartini's photograph reveals the accumulation of knowledge from dozens of photographers in nearly 2 decades of attempts to capture a characteristic movement of Leônidas as a player. Again, he is not the inventor of this movement, as he told us in the video, but he was the first one in Brazil photographed executing the bicycle. And the photograph worked as a kind of proof of this. Clearly, he made the wishes of thousands of people come true. And his image provides the basis for another even more famous bicycle move photograph, Pelé's one. This one. This photo, it's from Alberto Ferreira in 60s. It is most iconic, isn't? And do you know why? Because his author could capture the last and most beautiful moment, the fifth one, the last one, the fifth one. And in this scheme, we have the perfect parallel and perpendicular lines. It's like a mathematical thing. And okay, I hope these 3 examples linking Blackness with personal, public, geopolitical, technical, and sportive content may help to understand Stuart Hall's claims that the mainstream or mass popular culture in America depends on Black people's traditions, or I dare say, their futures. Thank you.